Hello, everyone. My name is Vito Quaglia, and this is a matter of principle. Today, our guests are the Prospector and Kait from the Prospector Show on Rock 107, Northeastern PA's radio station, who I grew up listening to, classic rock on Rock 107. So this is really cool for me to talk to these guys. So I want to welcome them to the podcast. So welcome, guys.
Hey.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being on. We really appreciate you giving us the time. So just to start us off for the people listening, if you guys could just give us a little bit about yourselves, how it started for you, how you wound up where you're at now. So it doesn't matter to me who starts off, Kait, Prospector.
Well, I'll go first because I'm older and I might die in the middle of this. How's that, kid?
There you go.
Oh my gosh.
So I grew up loving radio. My dad listened to Harry West in the car all the time as a kid. And I always thought that show was really cool. And I thought it was awesome that there's this guy talking to all of these people at once. I grew up in South Scranton. I could see the Times Tower from our house, from my bedroom. So when Rock 107 signed on the air, my older brother came home and told me how excited he was about having a rock station in the area. And we started listening, and I was dying to work there. I actually won a contest with two friends of mine, Mike and myself, and we were on the air for like about a half hour on a Sunday morning, and that was it. I walked out and I said, yeah, I could see myself doing this. And then I went to Marywood University back when it was still Marywood College, and worked at a couple other radio stations, and eventually interviewed a bunch of times at Rock 107 with really no luck. And then finally the program director at the time said, I need somebody who looks like a long hair rocker. And yes, I actually had hair back then. So he goes, you'll do, even though you're not ready to be on the air yet. And he hired me. And that was the beginning of that back in December of 1988.
Okay. Kait, how about you?
Hi, I'm Kait. I have lived in Northeast PA a majority of my life. I did a lot of traveling for a bit. I have my bachelor in fine arts with a focus in photography, believe it or not. So for a very long time, I've been doing, more photography based work, and like my jobs and everything were more photography based because I just wanted to be an artist so bad. And then back in, what was it? March, I saw that, the Times Shamrock had a listing, it was like, a co-host for the radio morning show. And I literally I had nothing going on at the time. I had just lost a job. I was really down on my luck. So I saw the listing and I was like, you know what? Screw it. What is the worst thing that these people can say to me? The worst thing they're going to say is no. So I applied, and now it's a career that I never anticipated myself to have. And I learn new stuff every day. And it's such an interesting thing for me to have under my belt now, and just continue. I learn so much every day, and it literally because of a whim.
Hey, sometimes that's how things work out the best, right? You just kind of take a flyer at something and it sticks. So that's awesome.
I've always really liked voice acting. So that was but it was never something that I thought I would, be into. I never thought that I would be in front of a microphone every single day. And I said to Prospector when I was interviewing, I was like, I watched this podcast with a bunch of voice actors, and I really like what they do. And now, we get to be in front of microphones every single day, and we are voices that people hear every single day, and it's just such a magnificent thing that all of a sudden happened to me, and I feel so lucky.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's really cool. And for me, growing up in Northeast PA, I grew up in Ashley, Pennsylvania, but Rock 107 was a staple of, everything that happened. I graduated from high school in 1988. So I remember being a kid, like what Prospector was saying, when the changeover, when FM became cool. I remember back in the day, we used to call WILK for the top 10 and 10 and things like that when we were in grade school. And then, FM became a thing. And then a buddy of ours in the neighborhood had the bumper sticker, I think. And I'm like, what's Rock 107? And then boom. And then you have all the personalities that have been there through the years, whether it was, Tim the Enchanter and Daniels and Webster and the Overnight Guy. I feel bad that I'm not going to name everybody I remember growing up, but they all had a place in my generation in this area, just grew up with it, and I think that's one of the things I want to talk about, how the changes, in 2024 are affecting those kind of local personalities. And it's so cool that you guys are here still, trading on that tradition and still building it and making it something new. So it's really cool. And it's neat that you guys are coming at it, really from two different worlds. Somebody who's been around the game for a while, and then somebody who's brand new to it. So you have a really neat kind of clash, but yet a cool partnership starting to grow.
Yeah, it's cool that there's a couple different perspectives and voices in the room and things like that. And, as somebody who's been doing it forever, it's kind of easy. Sometimes you can get stuck in ways and all that. So having someone else to say, well, why are we doing it this way is not always a bad thing. She's only allowed to ask that question once a month, though.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, you gotta, you have to earn that. You have to earn the ability to question the prospector. You didn't get your stripes yet. Now, so Prospector, this is a question for you. Now, and we could probably talk about this for 3 hours, but try to condense it the best you can. Like,
Sure.
How crazy is it for the changes that, from when you started to what things are going like now, whether it's satellite radio, the digital formatting, the social media stuff, like that's got to be almost, it happened, kind of like probably a slow trudge this way, but it probably seemed like it happened overnight as well.
Well, it's, when you're doing something as long as I've been in one industry, things are going to change. And I learned quickly that change is a good thing if you embrace it and find a way around it and let it guide what you do, and change is a bad thing if you sit there and scream at the clouds and go, this is not how it used to be. What's the matter with you? So fairly early on in my career, I learned that whatever changes were coming my way, I was going to embrace them, whether I liked them or not. What I did notice is that no matter what you do, if you're not listening to the radio, that's my competition. That's our competition. If you're out hanging out with your friends, or if you're playing on your Xbox or PlayStation, or if you're listening to satellite or Spotify or whatever, that still competes with us. Mm-hmm. Anytime you're not in front of the radio, that's my competition. That's a high bar because, we're lazy. We do an okay show. It's not great. It's okay. So there are a lot of things that are very exciting in the world that people could be doing rather than listening to the show. So I'm always happy when they do. But I definitely noticed that luckily so far cars and businesses still seem pretty locked in. And when I say businesses, I mean a lot of factories and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. We'll get time with people in their cars. We'll get time with people while they're at work. And that seems to still be working for us. If you want to, I tell people this all the time. If you're really like into music and really, really, really into a band, any one band, like say it's Zeppelin or Pink Floyd or AC/DC or Fleetwood Mac, no radio station is going to satisfy you on that unless it's their radio station, unless it's like, Tom Petty radio or something like that, because sooner or later we're going to have to play something else. And the thing is, we have to play the hit. We got to play the songs that most people know so that more people stick around at any one time. So everybody's iPod is better than my iPod, so to speak.
Gotcha. Now, Kait, for somebody who's, newer into the career, and specifically, radio, growing up when you were kind of listening to music, were you somebody that was bouncing around to all different stuff, or did you have a favorite radio station? Like, what was it like for you when, in your teenage years and kind of trying to figure this whole thing out?
Well, I bring this up all the time. My father really shaped my taste in music. He'd have like the Jeep or the Dodge Durango in the center console, and that's where all your CDs were. And I would get to pick what they were. And it was always like, it was always Aerosmith. Prospector and I talk about it all the time. Like, I got to pick what we were listening to in the car because that's what was there. That's what was in the car. That's the CD that he had. And like, I grew up on Fleetwood Mac, on Aerosmith, on Rush. And I have diverted a little bit. Like, as I got older, I started listening to like Lady Gaga. I listened to a lot of like metal, and I listened to like a lot of different stuff. But like, I knew getting into this career, I knew what my roots were, and I knew that it was going to be beneficial for me. And I thank my dad a lot for it too, and my mom too. My mom, really liked REO Speedwagon and everything like that. So the music was always there in my upbringing, and it's, now that it's back, I am so thankful that it was there at the start.
Well, and I think, like when you talked about your dad and that informs like so much of people growing up, right? Whether it's I remember going to a barbershop on the corner of Hazel Street, Joe Ritz, this old Italian guy, and they always had like WNAK playing in the background, you know what I mean? And as much as I didn't like it, it squirmed, like that's tied to all those memories of probably from when I was 4 to, 10 years old getting my haircut, was those songs on that radio station sitting in the corner of the barbershop. And there's so many different things that, tie us to things we heard in formative years, especially, our teenage years. And that's the one thing I think, like you said, Prospector, iPods and satellite, you could, if you just want to listen to, the B-sides of certain songs from 1974, there's probably a satellite station out there for you. But if you want to, listen, build a relationship with the guys and girls who are talking to you, in between songs and whatnot, you have to listen to what you guys are doing, and there's not a lot of you left anymore because of so much else going on. So do you see it like, hey, you're kind of like Mavericks, you know what I mean? There's not a million morning shows. Like, what does it feel like to kind of still be doing this kind of stuff?
I think in Northeast PA, we're lucky that we have a lot of other good heritage morning shows. Frankie on Magic 93 has been there since the late 80s.
Yep.
And, Rocky and Rocky and Sue before that have been there forever. You got Doc on Froggy. These are guys and girls who are talented, who've been doing this for a long, long time. I'm lucky enough that it's been the last 15 or so years of my life doing mornings and years doing afternoons and all that before that. But I think you hit upon something before that's key to people doing this job and being good at it, and that is building a relationship. People will come up to me, and I'm sure it happens with Kait as well, and they'll talk about something they heard on the show, or they'll talk about a characteristic of you that you not even know that you talked about on the show all that much. People tend to know that I'm a cyclist, and I talk about it on the show, but I don't talk about it that much. People will ask me questions about my wife because my wife has picked football games on the show. She's been part of other segments, if they're like relationship questions or, things like that. So that kind of stuff happens because you're building a relationship with the listener, because most listeners listen to the radio one-on-one. So you're talking to them, they're listening to you like hopefully you're a friend. And I think those relationships get built in a very real way where years down the line, people come up to you and talk to you about something that touched them for whatever reason. And you're like, man, I can't believe anybody paid attention to half the BS I was saying.
Well, and I think, Kait, you probably bring to the table, more, again, I don't want to disrespect the prospector here, but Kait is probably more adept to like the TikTok and the more recent social media platforms out there. Is that true? Are you the one in the studio teaching the old fella how to do some new stuff, or is he up to date with this stuff?
I will tell you what, he is like way more tech savvy than me, but like we've been teaching each other so much different stuff that like I learned TikTok very quickly, and he was right up behind me. Like he was just as fast at learning it. But like when it comes to tech stuff, he's got it figured out. I'm kind of jealous.
All right. Okay, cool. Well,
I've actually had a pretty good head for that my whole life. I studied electronics in high school. I'm usually pretty good at that kind of stuff. Like I don't get freaked out. Like recently, we changed what we call a playout system, which is basically a computer system that houses all our music, all our commercials, all that stuff. And it's a huge endeavor. And a lot of people are like, oh, it's going to take us forever, blah, blah, blah. And like, we spent 2 weeks with the people installing it. But I would say by day 2 or 3, I was pretty locked into it.
Mm-hmm.
I've usually been pretty good at that stuff for whatever reason. And I think that served me well in this business because so much stuff changes.
Oh God, yeah. I remember, like I said, dating myself as one of somebody around here who has an AARP card. I'm going to be 54. In college, we went to Wilkes, and we had the college radio station there. Had a couple of things there. And it was funny because even at that time, I was a classic rock guy. You go on there and everyone's pushing the classic, the college music stuff, which is cool.
Yep.
But even that time, I'm like, hey, I want to do. I wanted to be like you guys there. Like I want to do like a classic rock. Like, all right, you could do that. They gave me like the 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. slot because they're like, yeah, okay, because you're going to get a lot of college kids that want to hear that. But I didn't care. And I was really, just doing it for me and for some of my buddies that, might be on their way to work or something. So, but I remember that was back in the day with vinyl and, you guys know the right terms, but those like pre-recorded little things you'd pump in for your different messages and public service announcements, things like that. So you manually
carts.
There you go. And we're, manually doing all that stuff. So now I can't even imagine the spaceship it must look like with so many different things going on today.
Yeah, it definitely has like that kind of like mass control thing. Basically it looks like a big CD player on one side and then a bunch of other stuff that you can drag and drop around on the others. It's funny that you mentioned like playing classic rock on college radio. I was at Marywood, which was VMFM, and they're getting ready to celebrate 50 years. Actually, they're already starting to celebrate it. I can remember lugging my own CD player and CDs to the station every time I did a show, just so I could play some more of the music that I wanted to hear on the show. They were nice enough to let me do a metal and a hair metal show back in like 1986, 87.
There you go.
In addition to a regular show, like where I played the stuff they wanted me to play, which I turned out to love a lot of that as well.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's what's cool about, I think, the college radio stations you know, people that get involved with that stuff, you get to learn, you know, the technical stuff, you know, back how things work. But then you start, if you get good at it, like you did, you know, you start to learn that on-air personality and what works and how to connect with people. Like we talk about relationships. So like throwing that out, is there, and I know you guys do a lot, you know, everybody, you know, sees you guys out in the community and doing different things, but is there something that you guys are involved with now, a community cause or something you're doing that is like kind of a priority for you or something you'd like to get out there and do? I know the stuff with the grocery stores when you go there and do that, but is there anything else going on right now, a community project?
I was actually just going to talk about the pantry raid because I think that's such a big deal. That's coming up September 5th and 6th, and that's where we team up with Garrity's Fresh Grocer and Garrity's Ace Hardware locations and a couple other places like Nunzies are helping us out, and Century Dental helps us out, and Net Credit Union helps us out. And we raise non-perishable food items in the late summer, early fall when the food banks are really, really struggling because everybody's thinking about it around the holidays and not so much this time the shelves get dry. To me, that's a big deal. And it's something that I got involved doing a pantry raid almost years ago. And it's an annual event for us. And I love it. I get to meet so many people. You get to hear stories of people who at one time needed the service and now are in a position to help, or sometimes the other way around. And everybody's just so thankful to come out and make donations. It's great. But there's a lot of other little things too, and little pet causes. Like one thing that I think about a lot, and I've talked about it on the air, I've ranted about it and done some stuff to kind of help try and make it better here and there, is I think Northeast PA is an incredibly difficult place to walk sometimes. And what I'm talking about is like you go to boroughs, some of the like, and I'll use like Dixon City or Wilkes-Barre Township as an example. There's not a lot of sidewalks if you're trying to get to Walmart. And I think that's an issue. You know, if you need to get to a grocery center like Wegmans or something and there's no sidewalk, you're risking life and limb walking on the street. And I think that's hugely important. Part of it because I'm a cyclist and I want room for myself too. Part of it because I've seen people walking there and I think to myself, these people are going to get killed. And, you know, there was the story years ago on Montage before they put that walking lane in where the gentleman who got hurt there for a country concert and ended up passing away. These are horrible stories that are relatively easy to fix if we make it a priority. So that's a pet cause rather for me, I'd say.
Well, I tell you what, I was talking to Pittston's Mayor Mike Lombardo, and
great guy.
And one of the things, tremendous guy. And one of the things that we talked about a little bit, and even some of the business people have been talking about, the idea of walkable communities. You know what I mean? And people, whether they're up in age and it's harder for them to walk around, or if there's people that are trying to relocate, like that's a selling point. Where if you go to these places, they're newer communities. There, you have the little markets are a couple blocks away from each other, things like that. You don't have to go to the mall, quote unquote, or the bigger shopping centers. You have these smaller places you can walk to. So yeah, that's a thing. I mean, that's pretty cool that you're bringing that up because that is another thing that makes where we live. It could make it a lot better if people had more walkable neighborhoods and they didn't have to risk, life and limb to go get a quart of milk or something. So that's a really good point.
And there are definitely people out there working to make that better. So that's good. And, more so than my big mouth, which is great.
No, well, listen, you need to rant. When people, people listen. That's the whole idea of, why I wanted to talk to you guys because you make an impact probably more than you realize. And that's why I'm going to throw this one to Kait. So somebody who, hasn't been doing this since 1988, right? But tell us a little bit about you're out in public somewhere and someone recognizes you from the show, says something to you, comes up to you, anything like that. Have you had any celebrity moments yet?
So I was getting my teeth cleaned a couple weeks ago and I was making conversation with the hygienist and she was like, oh, so like, what do you do? And what do you know? Overhead was like one of the commercials for something that I had done. And I was like, oh, that's me. I was like, the commercial playing above you right now, that's me. That's what I do. And it was like that was a very surreal moment for me because I had only been working at the station for like a couple of weeks and I had only done a couple of commercials and I was just like, this is a crazy situation happening right now. We actually did a shout out for the ladies at the dental office too. And I got a phone call the next day and they were like, that was so nice. Thank you so much. But I was at the gas station the other day. I told Prospector.
I just want to say, if you didn't tell this story, I was going to tell it. So I'm glad you're saying it.
I was at the gas station the other day. I'm like finishing up and this gentleman pulls up next to me and he has a Rock 107 bumper sticker. And I was like, yes. And he gets out and he starts pumping his gas. And I was like, hey man, like sick Rock 107 sticker. And he just was like, thanks, question mark. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, I'm Kait. It's nice to meet you. And he was like, Okay. Like I was just like a random stranger introducing myself to him. And then I was like, oh, okay. Like what? Like I moved on. And then I go to get in my car and I just hear, wait, like with Prospector in the morning? And I was like, yeah, man, that's me. And he goes, oh, you look a lot different than I thought you were going to look. And I was like, oh, it's like, sorry, man. Like, I don't mean to disappoint. He goes, yeah, I thought you were going to be girlier. And I was like, you know what, man? You have a great day. Like it was, I had moments like that.
Yep.
But I've also had moments of like, I went to a music festival recently where someone came up to me because they recognized me, and it was really nice. You know what I mean? Like to have people be like, oh, I love listening to the show. I relate to the little weird quirky things that you do. And you know, you're really not that strange. Don't let Prospector bully you. You know what I mean? So like people are listening and they are getting an idea of who I am. And like, I never anticipated to have a type of audience that would be like, yeah, I recognize Kait. Like, I understand what she's going through or like what she's doing. And she might be a little weird, but you know what? I like her. You know, it's crazy that I never anticipated it to happen.
Well, I tell you what, and what I think is cool, like the area, the spot that you guys are filling is, you know, when we grew up, I'm going to say when we grew up, because Kait, you're definitely younger than the Prospector and myself, but you know, there's so many different areas, you know, bands, you could go see them live, right? Whether it was church bazaars or all the different bars and nightclubs, they're littered all over, you know, Luzerne and Lackawanna County. Every weekend you could go see a dozen bands, and those days are long gone, right? So, and a lot of those were cover bands that played classic rock and things. So the people's appetite is limited. I mean, there's only certain places that they could do that. Now again, satellite has changed the world, and you could create stuff and listen to everything. You don't have to have a million albums at home. I get that. But I think, you know, like when I'm driving in my car and I'll have a satellite radio on, you hear all the music. That's great. But like, I want to hear someone talk. I want to hear somebody tell me a little bit about that song, or maybe, you know, it was a live cut and that they went to that concert, or like you want that human interaction. And as much as all the other stuff is slick and fast and everything's at your fingertips, I think people want to hear you. So being quirky and goofy and the interaction you guys have, I definitely think it's filling a spot. Like, do you guys feel that?
Definitely. I mean, you can hear it just going back to meeting people on the streets or text or phone calls you get and stuff like that. I definitely think that kind of stuff will resonate with people. A good story about a band you saw. If you know you're playing, if I'm playing a Rat song and I start talking about seeing them back at Rocky Glen Park in 1983 or 84, and you know, maybe sneaking alcohol into the park and maybe throwing up after I got off the roller coaster. Right? Not that those things happened or didn't happen, but the point being is those are the good kind of stories that, you know, everybody remembers their first concert or their big concert. So people resonate with that thing. You know,
absolutely. I mean, and they're like the glory days, right? And the war stories you get to tell, or somebody knew somebody that was there. I mean, 1988, I remember it was my 18th birthday. I think it was, or in my head it is anyway. Guns N' Roses and Aerosmith at Pocono Downs, which was, I mean, epic. And, you know, just crazy things that I witnessed I can't repeat, you know, and it was just, but it was a great show. And Guns N' Roses really was newer at the time. I think they might have played some stuff from GNR Lives that people didn't know. I think they did Patience, I think. And the people were like, what's this stuff? So, and everyone was there, right? Even though there was only so many people there, everybody that grew up in Wyoming Valley was at that show, if you ask them now. So those kind of things are really cool. Has there been, I don't know, like it's maybe either one of you guys, a singer, a band, some other celebrity that you guys have met, you know, that you have like a crazy story about, like that you through 107, anything like that?
Oh, I'm sure there's a ton. First of all, they definitely did Patience at that show.
Okay. So I'm right.
Yeah. I was at that show as well. And I'm like, when you start talking about it, I'm like, did they? I think they did, but I just went to Setlist FM and they definitely did it at that show. Cool. I mean, like for me, I got to meet some pretty cool people, a lot of industry people, and of course, you know, a lot of like music people and things like that.
But like one that sticks out, like somebody like, oh man, I'm glad I got to meet that person because of my, you know, what I do. Anything like that? Like a Mount Rushmore kind of guy?
For me, the guy I was probably most excited to ever meet was, I'm a big Red Hot Chili Pepper fan, and I knew I was going to be interviewing either John Frusciante or Chad Smith from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. We weren't sure until we got there which one we were going to get. So I was amped beyond belief for that, and a little relieved when we got Chad Smith as opposed to John Frusciante, who's an amazing guitar player and a great musician, but he's kind of a little standoffish and a little more reticent to talk to people, as opposed to Chad, who was a lot more bombastic, and it turned out to be great. And then the bonus part of that is we also ended up interviewing Dave Grohl, that day. This was like 2000. So Foo Fighters' second album had just come out. They were just starting to really pop, and he was hands down the nicest celebrity I've ever met in my life. Just so much fun and so cool. And so like that show in and of itself, meeting those two people, turned out to be a great, great day. And it's literally, those are the only two, I think maybe the only two or some of the only few pictures of me with quote unquote rock stars that I've ever saved, because they're just both so cool and meaningful, you know?
Cool. Kait, how about you? Do you have anybody that you met or you want to meet even if you didn't meet them yet?
I haven't met anybody that like blew me away, you know, like Prospector and I were lucky enough to meet some cast members of The Sopranos randomly.
That's cool.
We went up to Mount Airy because I needed like to learn, and he was just like, well, The Sopranos are going to be there. And I was like, I don't care. Like, I got to learn. I don't know if there's anyone that I would like want to meet. I have this conversation with my friends all the time. I just think it is so cool that I'm lucky enough to like physically give away tickets to some of these shows that like we gave away like Green Day tickets, and I was texting my friends like that are into Green Day, and I was like, listen, I'm not telling you why, but like listen to the station this day, and this day. And they're like, okay. And it's like, I feel so privileged to just like be able to, you know, have these tickets in my back pocket and give them out to these fans. Like it's like such a crazy feeling that I never knew existed. It's such a lovely emotion. But to answer your question, I don't know if there's anyone out there at the moment that I would be like dying to meet. I just feel so lucky in general, like coming into work, you know what I mean? Like it's just, I get to talk about
That'll wear off. Don't worry.
I mean, I don't know if you're going to be able to, you know, negotiate any raises if you keep saying that you love what you do. You don't even care if they pay you for it. So you better, you know, don't say that publicly too much, Kait. And Green Day's new album, by the way, awesome. When I came to
yeah, great record.
Wow. I was like trying to get my kids, and my kids are 20, soon to be 26, 24, and 20. And I did get them into vinyl, and they appreciate the classic stuff. So when I throw stuff at them, they do give it a listen, and I try to reciprocate. I try to listen to some of the newer stuff. So I'm not that old guy that just, you know, complains about people, you know, throwing their Frisbee in my yard. Now, is there something that I don't know, Kait, maybe you're closer to this, you know, but I don't know, maybe Prospector is going to do this for the next 50 years. Not sure. But do you see yourself, like either one of you guys answer this one, 25 years from now, 30 years from now, what is radio is it still going to be around? Is it going to morph into something crazy? What do you guys think?
I mean, I don't think I'll still be doing it 30 years from now. That would make me 86 years old.
You never know. You never know.
If I'm lucky enough to be alive at that point, then probably, because I don't know what I would do if I retired. So maybe even just part-time or something like that. The one thing that this industry has done, going back to AM and then FM in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, is it's always been good at reinventing itself. Back in the 40s, radio was long-form entertainment programming, and then TV came along, and all those shows and soap operas and comedy shows went to TV, and radio went, oh, what do we do? And then all of a sudden, music formats and news talk formats and things like that were born. And, you know, you get new formats all the time. They get tried out, and some stick and some don't. But the people who are way above my pay grade, who run many, many companies in this industry, are generally ahead of the curve and smart enough to switch things up or to try something here and there. And when one pops, they run and go for it. That being said, everything's changing so fast. Who knows? You know, we might just be kind of like a pager service in a couple of years where nobody has us except for 3 people. But I'm hoping that's not the case, because I still have bills to pay.
Kait, do you have what do you think as a younger set of eyes? What do you see in the future?
I literally just had this conversation with one of my friends this past weekend about how like getting this job was a door opening in my career, because like, you know, podcasts are going to be around for a while. Even if it's not on the radio, people still want to hear, you know, the Prospector Prime Cut stuff. And I had people that are like, oh, will you send me that? I'm like, yeah, like absolutely. And, you know, this opened up, we talked about it briefly earlier, talked about the door opening of voice acting, and like I never knew that yapping would open up so many doors for me, and like talking, but like, even if it did change, I think, you know, there are still people out there, like my friends included, that want to hear just the talking and just the discussion and the conversation that we have. So like the change down the road is scary, but it doesn't feel like it's going away, and it's nice.
No, I'm telling you what, and this is, I'm not in the blowing smoke department, but in what I do, I'm a high school principal, and the breakdown in the ability to people to communicate, appropriately, but even inappropriately. People young people especially don't know how to really have a debate, and even adults are probably the worst example of that. If you have a different idea than someone else, like everyone just goes from 0 to 60 and it's gone, and everyone, retreats to their tribe and whatnot. And so when people could tune in and listen to you guys back and forth about whatever, and just listening to people have conversations, serious, funny, or, you know what I mean? You're just modeling the ability to communicate, and I know it sounds very elementary, but I think we almost have to teach people how to communicate anymore. It's I don't know if it was COVID or if it was just everyone staring at their phones and not talking, whatever it is. The more people could listen to somebody have conversations and just have fun being around and developing relationships, I think it's needed. And that's just, Vito's opinion on it. But I definitely think what you guys do, means a lot. And again, to circle back at the beginning there, everything is about relationships, right? And that's why when your listeners tune in or go and visit you when you're, out in the public somewhere, that's because they trust you guys, and they built that kind of relationship. And it is, like Prospector said, intimate, where people listen usually one-on-one to you. Like you're like in their ear about different stuff. So that's kind of like pretty cool that you have almost a responsibility to like be genuine and like every day, not wreck that relationship. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned genuine, because that's a big part of things. If you're faking something, over time it gets figured out, and it doesn't really take that much time. It gets figured out pretty quick. Being genuine, being authentic, I think is really the thing that sets good radio personalities apart. But that doesn't mean that there's not some exaggeration, because what'll happen to me a lot is people say, "Hey, you're much nicer than I thought you'd be," or "You're not as big you're not as big a loudmouth as you are on the radio." I'm like, a good radio personality takes one facet of their personality and turns that up a little bit. And I chose the kind of an asshole part to turn up a little bit.
Yep.
You would not believe the amount of people that have come up to me and are like, "Is Prospector really that mean?" And like, I'm like, no, but I want you to believe it.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, if you're
acting there,
if you're really good at something, people blur that line between the actor and the character, right? So that's telling you got some chops there, my friend. So that's a good thing.
I guess that's a good thing. And, I've been doing it for a long time, and it's fun for me to take sometimes the thought that's in the deep recess of my mind and put it out there a little bit. Like one of my favorite things on the radio that we do is "Am I a Jerk?" And it's funny because I like it more when people say yes than when they say no. I like it when people tell me I'm a jerk more than when they don't. And my wife, Tara, who, been through all this with me over the last 15, 16 years or so, always laughs at that. She's like, "Why do you like it when they tell you you're a jerk?" I'm like, "I don't know."
But yeah, and I think it's like, that you're like, I don't want to say like, I want to say the village idiot. That's not the word I was looking for, but like the provocateur, where you could you push it and push it and push it, and you're going to get pushback and whatever thing it is. So, and I think that's what you appreciate. Like this, how far can I take this? And again, you don't go way too far where some people are like, "Oh my God, that guy should be, FCC's calling you or something," but just that you push a little bit. And I think that's another thing that sets you guys apart, because what you do in the back and forth that you guys do is different than, the other people in the morning or anywhere really nowadays. Just throw this out to you guys. Favorite band, Kait, if I said, okay, give me your number one band that you would want to go see it live, or a song you're going to listen to in 20 minutes, who is it?
I've already seen them live, but I'll see them again. Fleetwood Mac.
Oh, look at you. Jeez. Okay. Prospector, what do you got?
Fleetwood Mac.
I would say that there's two bands that I'm dying to see right now. One I've seen a ton of times, but I just feel like the end is near for AC/DC, so I'd like to see them one more time. I'm hoping they come to America. The other band is a Swedish hardcore punk band that I've never seen live, called Refused, who I almost saw in March of 2020, but I think we all know what happened in March of 2020, and it never worked out for me. So that's a band I would be dying to see. So if anybody is into Swedish hardcore and would like to go with me if they tour America, let me know, because my wife hates them and definitely won't go.
But and to DC, AC/DC, I saw them several times live myself. I think the Black Ice tour started in Wilkes-Barre. I think when they launched that one back in the day.
They rehearsed in Wilkes-Barre for about 5 days. They did a dress rehearsal show the night before it kicked off, because I remember I took my stepdaughter Allie to that. She had never seen AC/DC. I think she was 16 or 17, maybe 18 at the time. I took her to that, and she had a blast. And then my wife Tara and I went to see the full show the next night. It was amazing. Great tour.
So loud. I mean, that probably the loudest concerts I've ever been at were AC/DC shows. And
I remember telling Allie, I remember saying, "You want earplugs?" Yep. No, I don't need earplugs for the concert. And I'm like, I bought earplugs and I got a pair for her. And then like a song in, she's like, "Do you have those earplugs?" I'm like, "Here you go."
Oh yeah. If not, you can't hear for like a week.
In the 80s.
Yep.
Yeah. I saw AC/DC for the first time at Broome County Arena, and I think it was like Fly on the Wall tour. So 85, maybe 86. And my brother and I went and couldn't believe how loud they were, even before the cannons went off at the end of the show.
Yep.
So I never made that mistake with that band again.
Now, what would have been the place I saw Bonham back in the day? Would it have been Broome County, or to me it seemed like an airplane hangar. I saw when they had that one song, he had a singer. I can't remember the song that they had.
Yeah, you're talking about Jason Bonham's solo band in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yep.
I know they played in Harrisburg on a snowy night, because my friend Chris and I were driving down and decided we wanted to live more than we wanted to see Bonham.
It was it might have been Broome County, to be honest with you. It was definitely
possible.
It wasn't too far away.
We could have opened for somebody there.
Yep.
You know, I know they never headlined that particular show or that particular place. What was that song? I feel like something like Into You, but that's not it.
Was it like Waiting or something? I want to say
Waiting for You? Maybe Waiting for You.
Yeah. How about that?
Wait for you. Singular. Wait. No active verb.
Now that's one show, right? Like that's the next question. What's one show, one band that you didn't like? Can you imagine being at that last Zeppelin show, like at the hotels? That would have been like, oh my God. And it was so good for guys that hadn't played together in so long, and the pressure, because that didn't want to look bad. They just really, that was incredible. What would be a show that was, I don't care if it's Woodstock or if it's like, the Sex Pistols when they played one, it's something that happened that you wish you would have been there for.
I mean, for me, I never got to see Queen.
Okay.
I love Queen. My mom was a huge Queen fan. It's definitely permeated into my musical lexicon there. I'm a massive Queen fan. I never got to see them. So I don't care if it's like, late 80s Queen in Montreal or actually probably late 80s would have been in like Brazil, because they stopped touring North America by the mid 80s, or wherever. I just wish I got to see Queen. Like if I could have seen Queen when they opened for Mount the Hoople at Wilkes College back in 74, that would have been fantastic. But I was like 6 years old, and I didn't know anything about it.
Yep. Kate, how about you?
It's crazy, because we were just talking about how Aerosmith is like, quote unquote, done.
Yep.
But I think like their music to me growing up was so much weirder than every other like rock that I was listening to at the time. So like, I'm going to have to, I wasn't alive, but if you want to take me back in time, I would love to see those guys like in their prime, just like anywhere in general, just because I think they were such it was strange for me, and it was weird to listen to. So I think that would be super fun.
I got a follow-up question here. Which prime, late, like mid 70s prime or late 80s prime?
I'm going to say late 80s, because that stuff was weird.
I mean, I saw them a couple of times, and they were a great live band, from Permanent Vacation, Pump, all that stuff. There was a couple of good tours.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Metallica would be fun too, but they're still around. They're still coming.
Back in the day, I mean, and the other cool things, like there were so many cool cover bands, like the Back Doors I was a huge Doors fan, still am. And to see the Back Doors play around in the Valley, it was always fun back in the day. And like those, like I said, those days are gone. But I'll throw this out to the Prospector. So, remember when kind of stuff. Bon Jovi, did they play at the Kingston Armory in the 80s? Do you remember that?
They definitely played. They played Rocky Glen Amusement Park on the 7800 degree Fahrenheit tour.
Yep.
I want to say they played the Armory at some point early in the Slippery When Wet tour, but I'm not 100% sure that's accurate.
Yeah.
I know Poison played there. I know the Scorpions and Judas Priest and Megadeth and a bunch of other bands I saw there.
And were you there? Well, there was a riot. Was it Blue Oyster Cult when there was some kind of big brouhaha that happened at the Armory? Do I have that band? Was
it that, or was it the Sabbath Mob Rules tour where that happened?
It might have been. I just remember something went sideways down there. And
I was not at that show.
I remember when the Bishop was upset when Ozzy was supposed to play the CYC, and we didn't get Oz in Northeast PA.
I had tickets to that show. I got tickets to that show, and I'm like, damn it! And it took me that was like 83, 84, I think. I never got to see it. It was like 2006 before I finally saw Ozzy.
And my brother and I and one of my best friends were on our way to, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, Hershey to see Van Halen, and David Lee Roth got the flu and they canceled the show. And that was the only show on that little tour that they did that they canceled. And I never got to see Van Halen. I always wanted to see Eddie live and then, he passes away, whatnot. But yeah, David Lee Roth really broke my heart. And we had like front row seats. We're right to the side of the stage, right hanging off, like, up in the bleachers right there. And, he has to go and get a cold. Thanks, Dave.
Now, was this like the different kind of Truth tour, or was it after that? Like, when was that?
It was just the last one they were going to do. Like,
okay.
Whatever was out there. And I know.
I'm sorry, I was going to go back and answer the Bon Jovi question.
Yeah, go ahead.
They played at the Kingston Armory January 3rd of 1987 on the Slippery Wet Tour.
Okay.
And of course, they played Pocono Downs on the big New Jersey tours.
Yep. And Rocky Glen also had, I think back when I was in high school, was Night Ranger, right? They were there with Sister Christian, I believe, back in the day.
Yeah, Midnight Madness tour, Rocky Glen Park. Those tickets, that was a show that KRZ gave away all the tickets to. They weren't even selling tickets. It was a complete KRZ giveaway. And I remember I went to high school at Scranton Tech, but for some reason the KRZ van was over at Scranton Central. So we skipped like 8th period, I think, walked over, and I got tickets from a guy named Jim Rising, who was like the program guy down there and one of their DJs, who later became my boss at Rock 107 on 2 separate occasions. And it was a big influence in my life, a big mentor of my career was Jim. And it's just always funny that he handed me those 3 tickets,
Mm-hmm. And, well, I went to Bishop Hoban, and we won tickets. We had Cinch come to play to our gym back in the day. I think they might have played Where Are You Now 3 times during that show. I'm not 100% sure, but it was fun, and we got them there because we all dialed, I think, KRZ at the time and had the most votes or whatever. Now, you talk about Jim Rising. Is there somebody, would that be a guy that really got you involved in this as a big mentor for you, or is there anybody else out there that really helped you along the way?
Jim was definitely hugely helpful and influential, and I find myself acting in certain ways and saying certain things in settings and stuff like that. And in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, that's such a Jim Rising move. Jim was a huge, massive influence early on. Also, a guy named Chris Norton, who at the time was the program director at Magic 93, where I briefly worked. He knew that I didn't want to work there and I wanted to work at Rock 107, and was incredibly helpful, helping me get ready to be at least halfway decent enough to get an interview, and just an awesome guy. And then another guy, for me, a guy named Tom Bass, who was the bass man on the air at Rock 107 for a couple of years, did some show, like used to do the 10 at 10 and the 11 o'clock hour for a long time. Tom was a massive influence on me, really kind of crystallizing and formulating the personality that you hear on the radio every day. Really, he was the one who really convinced me to just turn that little asshole tendency up just a skosh and not be afraid of it. He taught me to not back away from opinions. Like, if you say it on the air, own it. Don't just say it and then say, well, I could be wrong. Don't soften your own stance, because other people will do that for you. I think I've actually said that to Kait in the past.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that came from Tom Bass. Well, those guys were hugely influential in my life on the air. I'm sure there's other people I'm forgetting. I know I can think of like Jim Davey, who was one of our early GMs at Rock 107, Jim Loftus, who, and not to sound buck kissy, but works there again, but he was always really good to me. And there's a lot. A guy named Al Pila, who I loved in college. When I was in college, he was on the air at Rock 107, and I was so jealous of him that he got to work there and I wasn't working there. And he later became a boss of mine down the road at another station too. He's a great guy.
Kait, how about you? Any mentors that helped you along the way?
Because I'm just so new at this, I don't have anyone that I know in person, but I brought this up when I was being interviewed to Prospector and Hoover. I started watching, in 2020, of course, I started watching this podcast that was just a bunch of voice actors playing Dungeons and Dragons, and just hanging out. And that's what they were doing. They were being themselves in front of a microphone, completely unfiltered. They didn't care what people were thinking. And I'm sitting there thinking, watching this at my old job, thinking I love these people. They're a bunch of freaks. They're a bunch of nerds, and they don't care. And I went into this interview just being I don't care. I want to do this. I'm going to learn how to do this, whether I'm good at it or not. So there's a voice actor named Matthew Mercer, who is a very famous voice actor. And every single time he has something new that comes out, I'm going to sit down, see how he does it, and not replicate it, but see what I can learn from based off of like how he chooses to, you know, act and like do things with his voice and everything like that. So, but you know, I have so many friends that, you know, I'm so overly critical of myself, and I've got so many friends, like I got a friend named Emily and Jessica and Jake and CJ and all these people that are always like, you can do this, you know that, right? And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Like, I got this. Like, so half the time, like, I got my buddies.
Yeah. Well, and you need that support system, no matter who they are. Somebody who believes in you and helps. Like I always tell my kids, they need to have a little bit of what I call delusional sense of confidence, right? You have to believe in yourself more than anybody else, and heck with it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You just keep fighting. But no, I think that's just as important as anybody that, you know, was around in this business for 40 years giving you advice. Having that support around is immensely important. What about?
I'm gonna interrupt you here, Vito, because that's what I do. I interrupt. But Kate was talking about, like, you know, the voice actor and stuff like that, and I think it's good to emulate other people to a certain point, or to, you know, kind of take some bits and pieces from other things. And like, before I even got into radio, I was a big George Carlin fan. There's a lot of George in the way I try to phrase things. A big David Letterman fan. There's a lot of Dave in the way I act on the air sometimes, especially if I'm playing stupid. There's a lot of that in there too. And I think those things are good as well, just to have other people that who maybe you don't know it well, but you see do it and you're like, oh, okay, that's how I want to be. You know what I mean? Like, if I ever listened to a break and thought, man, that sounds like George Carlin, then that's like the happiest I'm going to be that day.
Oh yeah. And you're mentioning people who are the masters, right? Like if you watch interaction between Abbott and Costello, or you watch the way Jack Benny would just pan to the crowd and give you that look after he gave you, like, yeah, they were the masters. And if you could take little things at each one of those and put that's another ingredient in your soup. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a reason why, you know, 50 years after those people pass away, we still talk about them because they're freaking awesome.
Yep.
Now, we're talking about all the fun stuff that you guys do. What about, I guess there is, but I mean, is it pressure to be out and about and keep doing stuff, keep, you know, dancing for the organ grinder to get more ads? Like, do you guys feel that, like, we better be out, we have to get more ads, because if we don't have ads, we're not going to get paid? Like, what's that like?
I mean, I can't speak to how Kate feels about it. I feel like the company does a pretty good job of insulating me from that. I'm hoping the same with her. Like, obviously we know ratings need to be at a certain place and all that, but we've had great books and we've had bad books. I've got the attaboys for the great books and the don't worries for the bad boys. I've never felt like this is going to be the end because we had a bad book. I never felt like they were going to come in and yank the rug out from under me because we had a bad book. Yeah.
Well, and Kate sounds so positive all the time. I can't imagine that she would ever feel too stressed out, but I don't know. Kate, is that true?
That's so funny. Yeah. No, when it comes to like the sales side, I don't necessarily feel like as much pressure as I think the rest of the Times Shamrock staff does. But I say this to Prospector all the time because I'm just so new at this. I feel like I'm being hunted for sport sometimes because I want to be the best and I want to impress everybody and I don't want to let anyone down. But also, like, you're allowed to trip up every now and then, but make sure you get back up and like keep running because you're being hunted for sport.
And, you know, tripping, and we talk about this kind of stuff too. Like, you know, you're going to make mistakes, you know, stumble on words on the air, blah, blah, blah. It's not about not making a mistake. It's about how do I recover from said mistake? Do I, you know, have a little trip up, keep going and it sounds fine? Or do I have a little trip up and then completely fall down the stairs and the brake goes into the handbasket and you're doomed? The more that happens, the worse I'm doing.
Yep. And
I think too, he's seen me grow like I used to get so unbelievably upset with myself when I would mess up. And it's like we said, it's only been a couple of, you know, months since I've been there. Yeah. I've really learned to roll with my punches and be like, all right, you're allowed to mess up this time, but that's it. And like, I used to get so frustrated, and now I've really come into a rhythm of accepting, you know, okay, I messed up there. Let's not do it again. Let's learn from it. And I'm so thankful that like I had a bunch of people be like, you're good, dude. Calm down.
Well, and you're probably at that spot, you know, starting out and being so new and fresh at it, where you don't know that you're not supposed to do certain things. You know what I mean? Like, you almost have like that freeing thing because, you know, like, oh geez, 3 years ago, I used to have to do that. You know what I mean? So it's almost like you're just kind of plowing ahead and just figuring it out. And it's probably, you might look back on it in 10, 12 years and be like, oh geez, I can't believe I tried that or whatever it is. But right now you're like in that honeymoon. So like, just keep going, right? Now,
I'm trying my best every day.
What do you think? Give me the coolest thing about your job. Either one of you guys or both of you guys, but one at a time. Like, what's the coolest thing about what you guys do?
I thought you'd have an answer.
Wow. Geez.
I love when people ask me what I do because one, it's so new and it's super, super fun for me to be at a bar and someone be like, oh, what do you do for a living? And I'm like, oh, I'm a radio personality. And they were like, what? No way, for when this, that. Like, I love that I am entertainment for people. And I think I never thought I would be doing it. So like the idea of just being like, I make people laugh in the morning is like, I don't care how silly it sounds. It's genuine. Like, I think it's just so cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. And for me, like, occasionally I'll be out somewhere and somebody will come up to you and say, hey, I heard you talking about your mom and how she passed away from Parkinson's or, hey, I heard you talking about this or that. It's those kind of like moments where people hear you being a little bit more, I don't want to say like authentic, but like a little bit more open and like I used to worry when I was younger and early on in the business about always sounding cool, always sounding like I was on top of this, always sounding like I was like the hip guy who knew everything was going on. And now I'm like, I'm just going to sound like I sound and I'll deal with it if I don't know or if I maybe am being a little bit more vulnerable, that's okay. Like shortly after COVID, I went and had some therapy for a couple of things. And one of the things I was worried about at the time was just, some like social anxiety issues, which I've always had and I still have here and there. But like I talked about that on the radio and somebody came up to me, I think it might have been like 4 or 5 weeks later and said, hey, just so you know, I appreciate you mentioning that because I was dealing with some stuff. And after I heard you talk about it, I actually made an appointment and I'm going through the process and all that kind of stuff. And like, if one other person gets some help, dude, I'm happy that I did something. I'm happy I opened my big trap about it,
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that is so when you have those kind of roles where you're interacting with the community at large, you're providing entertainment, yes, and you're building these bonds and whatnot. But if you're actually influencing and impacting someone's choice on something, that's really cool. Not everybody gets to do that. Not everybody who sits in a cubicle pushing buttons and, importing data gets to do it. So it's really a unique situation that you guys have. So, I mean,
that being said, please just don't sit next to me at an event. Like my wife and Tara and I went to see a Broadway musical last week and I made sure I sat on the aisle. So it's not like I'm cured.
Gotcha. I hear you. Well, yeah. Well, again, crowds freak people out and you never know who you might have the coolest person in the world sit next to you one time and you wouldn't mind that, but then you just don't know. And I don't know what happened to me, and it definitely happened after my 40s. My whole life, I never had issues really with elevators. And then all of a sudden, like something just switched and I get so claustrophobic and I'm like panic stricken over it. And I'm like, where did this come from? It's nuts. And I definitely have to deal with that.
Yeah, you never know where it came from, but there are people out there who are trained and can help you with that stuff. Yep. And if it's to the point where it's getting I would say if it's getting in the way with you living your daily life, then it's time to figure it out.
Well, I definitely have to figure certain things. I'm married to a Sicilian who's very strong. Well, she's little in stature, but strong in everything. And she's just like, just get in the elevator. So
just get in there. Get over it.
That's my therapy so far. You'll be fine. Get in there. I'm like, okay, Joanne, you got it.
And who knows? Like I remember, I love bridges. I'm a big fan of large structures and bridges and all that stuff. And that stems from being a kid and being freaked out by driving over large bridges. And my dad saying, you should go and learn how these things are made and maybe that'll help you a little bit. And that for some reason that actually helped me, understanding that the flexibility in those structures was an important part of them not falling down. And these were good things. So who knows?
Yeah. I mean, the more you peel back things, you can see why, the reasons why things work. You take away some of that fear. Fear is the whole idea of because we don't understand it. But but in the moment, when your heart's beating out of your chest and you're starting to sweat, you're not thinking about all that stuff, right?
No, absolutely not.
All right. As we wrap up, first of all, I want to say thanks so much because this is really fun. I could talk to you guys about this kind of stuff all day long. I don't think, listeners want to hear that, but this was really cool. I really, really appreciate this. What I'd like to do is kind of revisit you guys down the road, maybe about some stuff, get in touch with you and see, if there's different themes we could talk about or whatever. But I don't know if you guys are open to that, but I'll definitely reach out to you.
How much does that pay?
Well, nothing right now. So yeah, we're unlike you. I don't have any ads or anything. I don't have a department of, yeah, I'm just a free Vito here. So, but it's been a lot of fun. And I want to thank you guys for what you do, because again, growing up listening to Rock 107 and having so much fun with all the different personalities over the years and listening to cool music has really been a part of my life. So I know I'm not alone in that sentiment. So on behalf of all your listeners, I want to say thanks and keep doing what you're doing there.
We're going to keep trying, man. Thank you so much.
No, and Kait,
thanks for having faith in me.
Well, and again, for somebody coming on, like you don't sound like you have any fear. You're just like blasting into this. And it's really a man's world, at Rock 107. There's been a couple, DCD I can think of, and a couple other people that were there for a long time, but really it's just been a bunch of old, grumpy guys there, so you're really doing a nice job.
They really took a leap of faith hiring, like a 30-something-year-old woman randomly. And I thank them for that, because this is like the best thing that's ever happened to me. So thank you so much for talking to me.
Yep. No, absolutely. So again, this has been the Prospector and Kait from the Prospector Show on Rock 1. Again, that was the Prospector and Kait from Rock 107's Prospector Show. So we want to thank them and thank you for listening. Stay tuned for another episode of A Matter of Principle coming up soon. Again, thank you for listening.